All right, let's do it live on a Tuesday edition of Cleveland Browns Daily. I am merely Beau Gibby joining me on the program today. How you living, buddy?
Hey, it's a Tuesday. It was a little chilly last night. And I think
I liked
we're in
it.
for a few more nights of that.
Yeah, I'm all right with it. I like a little bit of chill as long as we don't have the clouds and the sun's out, guns out today, so I can deal with this over here. So I'm fine with that. It is we are 16 days from the NFL draft right here in Cleveland. Gibby, it don't feel like it.
No. I mean,
it doesn't feel like it.
In past years, you pretty much had it figured out. In a normal year, you would know who's going number one. You might have an idea who's going number two, but maybe there's a little intrigue, suspense. No suspense. Sure. No suspense, 1, 2, and I would venture a guess probably even at number 3. There's probably
I think 1, 2, 3, 4 could all be quarterbacks by the time we get there. 5 is where I think the draft will start with Cincinnati, which is incredible good fortune for them that they could get the number 2 rated player in this draft, perhaps.
And then screw it up
Kyle
by taking
Pitts or
an
Jamar
offensive
Chase.
lineman.
Right, they may just take Penei Sewell, which I'd be thrilled by. Although I think he'll be a nice player. I was talking to Laurinaitis about this, and he said, look, in my time in the NFL, there wasn't any time where we schemed up what we were going to do with a tackle. And he said, with all due respect, that included Joe. Like, yeah, Robert Quinn was going to have his hands full. Joe was going to be a problem, but we didn't change our defense when we were playing against the best left tackle of a generation. Now, we schemed up, how are we going to stop Marshawn Lynch? How are we going to stop whoever it would have been at the skill position? So Cincinnati has an opportunity to really, you think about how good this division has been. You think about the opportunity there for them to maybe pass Pittsburgh this year. Could they pull that off? Because Connor signed with Arizona this morning. I don't know what Pittsburgh, and this, thank goodness, where it's not our problem, but they have problems on that roster in the middle of a transition. And to me, they are going to take a couple of steps back. It's us and Baltimore at the top, and then Cincinnati in what will be, again, I think, if the NFC West is the best division in football, then we would be second. I feel very confident of that.
I think you make the argument we are the best division. We're in the best division. I mean, the timing couldn't be worse,
Yep.
If we're trying to make a run here. But
yeah, so the West comparison, so if we're the best, if us and Baltimore are the 2 best, then the best in the NFC West would be the Seahawks and Rams at the top, right? I think the difference is the 49ers ought to be close. They ought to be healthy. If they're healthy, their ceiling is much higher than Pittsburgh's ceiling, in my thinking. I do think Arizona is ahead of Cincinnati, but not demonstrably ahead, especially if Cincinnati gets a playmaker to add to that mix offensively.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I wonder if San Francisco's not the worst team in that division.
I just think it depends on their health, and it depends on what they're going to do at number 3. Are they willing to? And rest assured, from their standpoint, if as much as we talk about, Kyle and being a genius and everything that they've done, if they pick a quarterback at 3 who's not a dude, it might be a fireable offense because they invested a lot in Jimmy Garoppolo, and now they want out of the Jimmy Garoppolo business. And now you gave up a lot to move up to 3 to get a quarterback. You had to know who you wanted when you made the pick. You had to know that who you wanted would be there, at least one of 2 players you wanted would be there in order for you to give up that to go get them. If you don't hit on that quarterback, to me, that's borderline fireable offense because that's twice then you would have whiffed on quarterback. So there's a lot of pressure on them to hit on number 3 and make sure that that's a dude. It needs to be for them.
Well, and I mean, you've got some players. You've got a good offensive line. Kittle obviously speaks for himself. But your running backs are still by committee. And
their committee there. They got some weapons. Defensively, they should be back, on the front to what they were a couple of years ago. You get a healthy Nick Bosa back. That's going to help. But there's a lot of pressure there. There's a lot of pressure there. But I still would rather be them than Pittsburgh, though, going into this season. I think Pittsburgh's in for a tough one.
Yeah. and I think you said it. If Cincinnati goes and does the right thing and gets a playmaker, Pittsburgh's the worst team in this division.
That's kind of where I'm at. And
Pittsburgh
they haven't been
lost
that.
a ton on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
You have no idea. You don't really have a running game. Your wide receivers are just all over the place. From a mental
They're
standpoint,
talented,
look what they've done this offseason.
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, yeah. Think about it. They'll still be really good defensively, although at corner, they're in the secondary, it'll be a bit of a step back. They still have Micah there and Joe, who's great, but that'll be a bit of a challenge. You got to replace Mike Hilton and so forth, so that'll be interesting. They will feel the loss of Bud Dupree, I think, even though it's, the way that they've done it's kind of a conveyor belt approach at that position. When is the last time that they were like the no doubt worst team in the division? I mean, you probably have to go back to the 80s. Is that like Bubby Brister, Louis Lips
Brister, like
era?
Those late 80s. We used to love thumping
them. Yeah, because we were great. Cincinnati was a Super Bowl contender, and Houston with Warren Moon was really good. So you probably got to go back a while to find a time when they were occupying. They've had a heck of a run here, to say the least. All right, let's get into the OBM Hot Topics. Ohio Business Machine, preferred copy provider of your Cleveland Browns, of all the X's and O's for your office. Call 216-485-2000 or visit ohiobusinessmachines.com. Jadeveon Clowney reportedly arriving tonight to meet with us tomorrow. Gibbe, you asked the question, what is the number one thing you're looking for if you are the Browns? His name to be signed on the line, which is dotted. That's it. That's it. Like, I'm sure, you're healthy, you're good. We want you here. We feel like you want to be here now. We've wanted you for a long time. Now's the time. Let's go. Sign on the line, which is dotted. To me, it's that simple. And I think what it would do, this notion, and any sort of conversation about would we rather have Clowney or not, no, we'd rather have Jadeveon Clowney. If you don't understand what he would do, can you imagine him lining up inside Myles Garrett in some form of a NASCAR package and going up against guards? The damage that he would create. This is an absolute no-brainer if this gets done, and it would allow Andrew Berry to approach the draft completely unfettered, which is what I think he wants. I think that is a position of incredible strength. I think he gets it. And hopefully tomorrow at this time we're talking about reportedly signing Jadeveon Clowney. I see no downside to this, nothing but positive, and I just wouldn't let him leave the building unless he's signed. I really wouldn't.
Yeah, obviously
Melon to get him some gear, like.
Yeah. What do you want? What
get him
the
healthy one?
Mellon and Company. Go
get him
go pick
that Cleveland Browns, the one that I saw Coach wearing and building the Browns that apparently you can only get if you are a coach or whatever. Like, get him one of those, and let's get this thing moving.
Yeah, I look, star power. You can't have enough of it, and he's still a very, very good football player. And I do like the physical is going to be pretty important tomorrow.
Sure.
I'm the one. There is a question in the back of my mind, like why Tennessee didn't bring him back. Because they need help defensively. But, it might just be something like money-wise, they just couldn't make it work. And so, therefore, he's back out.
I don't know their I don't know their situation. I don't know if he wanted to be there. I don't know any of that. What I know is that it's a good fit for us.
Sure.
Across multiple it makes you better immediately in your base defense. It makes you immediately better in any sort of nickel-dime package. It allows for Andrew Berry to approach the draft unfettered. Obviously, we think there will be a lean at corner, but there's still some talented corners out there too. But that could still be a lean. But I think you can then approach 26. The world is your oyster. Whoever drops you. Well, I know we have Sam Monson on today, and an interesting pick that he has us at 26, and one that I would be a proponent of. It just opens up your view of what you can do if you get this solved, because I think this is kind of the last thing that needs to be done via draft or free agency. And if you're able to do it in the way of Jadeveon Clowney, you're a better football. And again, I asked this to Jeremy yesterday when we had him on, Gibby. To me, it's a top 5 or 6, 7 roster in the league. That's what we have here. So you add him to the mix. Defensively, what you've done in one offseason is is really quite stunning. It really is. So I mean, I'm hopeful that it is, and I hope that this thing is wrapped up by tomorrow, that everything goes well and the meeting's good, and we get him to sign on the line, which is dotted. Nick Chubb released his own cereal, Gibby. It's called Chubb Crunch in partnership with PLB Sports Entertainment. It's hitting the shelves this fall. Chubb Crunch will be available online at plbse.com as well as Heinen's grocery stores around Cleveland. A portion of all proceeds will go to First Candle, an organization working to end sudden infant death syndrome and provide support to families who have been victims. He'll join athletes like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen in partnering with PLBSE to create the cereal. Do we know the flavor?
I don't think so. I have not. I've been looking. I have not seen anything about what the flavor might be yet, but, I mean,
my hunch is it's some sort of a Captain Crunch with the name. I mean, it works great. Chubb Crunch is great, but right, like some sort of a. The only negative to a Captain Crunch as a kid was occasionally if you were too aggressive in your pursuit of getting it into your mouth before the milk had a chance to soak in, you could get cut on the roof of your mouth by the edges of the Captain Crunch. That was the only negative to Captain Crunch. You remember that? How sharp the edges are? You got to let the milk get all, just softens it a little.
But there is a fine line. It's like when to pull a piece of meat off the grill. Like, you can't let it go.
It's an art.
If it goes 30 seconds over in that milk, now it's soggy. Wave it off, Ghost Rider.
That Captain Crunch is the best example of a cereal that it's almost like you hit the clock once you start, and it has to be consumed by this point, or it all just starts to deteriorate. What would be your what's your Mount Rushmore? Breakfast cereal Mount Rushmore as a kid.
I am a big Fruit Loops guy.
Are you really?
Yeah. I'm not. I like Fruit Loops. I really like a little Corn Pops.
Okay.
This is wow. This is. What about you?
I'm writing mine down now.
Okay.
I got it for you right now. I got it. So the George Washington on my Mount Rushmore is Cinnamon Toast Crunch. So that would be the first ballot. Put him in when we decide. Well, what are we gonna carve first into the side of a South Dakota mountain? Cinnamon Toast Crunch would go there. And then in the second slot, the Abe Lincoln slot, would be Crunch Berries. Crunch Berries over Captain Crunch. So I would go Crunch Berries would be the number 2 slot there. I would go Fruity Pebbles in the third slot. I love me some Fruity Pebbles. And then the 4th slot would be Cocoa Krispies. Love me the Cocoa Krispies.
See,
and
I'm not
all
a huge
of those,
chocolate guy. So.
Every single. Okay, well the other 3 weren't. The thing with all of those is the milk is such a treat at the end. The remnant milk is so strong.
I think I am a big fan, and this is a pretty bland cereal. I do like Life. I might have to put Life on there.
You put a little sugar on it, or you just eat that straight?
Eat it straight.
Does that have sugar in it?
A little bit. Not a lot, but it does have a little bit.
Okay.
And then I would go Apple Jacks.
There was the Cinnamon
Apple
Life.
Jacks number 4 on my list.
Oh, Apple Jacks is a win. That's a good job out of you. So what did you end up with? You end up with Life, Apple Jacks,
Fruit Loops, and Corn Pops.
Fruit Loops, Corn Pops. My kids love Lucky Charms. My wife gets it for them once a year at St. Patty's Day, and they crush that. They only eat the marshmallows.
I was going to say, we would do, for my girls, we would do around Halloween, like the Blueberry and the special themed. We would do those.
Yeah.
Yeah, periodically you get them like one box of good stuff, and it's gone in 24 hours. And I'm like, when it's gone, it's gone.
It's gone. It's gone. It's absolutely gone. As I mentioned, Sam Monson will join us at the bottom of the hour. His thoughts on the draft and what we could do and should do at 26. We'll go over the fits there. We'll go around the league coming up next. Off and running here on a Tuesday. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. All right, welcome back into Cleveland Browns Daily here on a Tuesday edition of the program. Beau Bishop here. And friends, this year start your spring cleaning with the pros. A perfect power wash. Dirt, mold, and algae accumulate on your home and lead to costly damages. Perfect Power Wash's safe process and professional technicians help remove these harmful contaminants. They will keep your house, your concrete, your deck, your patio looking beautiful, looking protected. This spring, do your home a favor. Leave the power washing to the pros. With 20 years of experience, over 100,000 satisfied customers, you know you are in great hands. Guys, don't wait. Spots on the schedule, filling up fast. Call Perfect Power Wash today. Use the promo code BEAU to save 10% on all services. News around the league, and there's not much of it, but Julian Edelman, the former Kent State star, of course, retiring. Will he stay retired is your first question, Gibby. I guess a man is as loyal as his options. And so if Tampa Bay were to come calling, I mean, I think everyone has said, well, that seems to be a perfect fit. He's had some injuries recently, and that's a big part of it. And so, yeah, I mean, I guess you'll see. I could see him coming out of retirement to play, with Tom in Tampa and in a very player-friendly organization with a chance to win a championship and a place with great weather. I mean, I think all of that adds up nicely.
I would have said yes 100% because there was an article that came out. There was some news that came out late day Friday. It was like a Friday news dump at like 4 o'clock that, the medical people were saying that Edelman would be back this year but wouldn't be able to make it through a 16-game season. Like the odds of that happening were slim to none.
Yeah.
So I would normally say yes, but on his video last night, he definitely made it appear like I'm retiring and I'm retiring a Patriot. Mm-hmm. And 12 great years with the Patriots.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could see it, but after that last night, I'm like, maybe he's not. Maybe he's just walking off into the sunset. And good for him.
I think your best intentions are that, right, is to do that, is to retire. But you don't know when that itch could come up, and you may want to scratch it. And that the Tampa Bay scenario is so perfect. I mean, it's just the perfect spot, if he wanted to do it. You asked this question, and it's one, why do we immediately, especially someone like Edelman, there's been a lot of talk about his Hall of Fame candidacy. And honestly, I think it's a little unfair to him to do that, because I think it diminishes. You find people that poke holes in it, and then you got to have a debate about it. Here's what I would say about the Hall of Fame in general that is probably, I don't even know how you address it, because what's done is done. It's just the facts. If you play on a Super Bowl champion and you are a close guy, you're getting in. And I think you can look no further than Pittsburgh and the Steelers. The amount of guys off those Steel Curtain teams, which are without question some of the best teams in the history of the game, but are we sure that both John Stallworth and Lynn Swann are Hall of Famers? I mean, are you sure of that? They're both Hall of Famers, really? Like, go back and look at what their achievements were. But they have these moments. And Edelman, I think his candidacy will be very similar to those guys, in that he has some moments. He's won a lot. He was Brady's main target for a long time. And he's got these Super Bowl moments that people will remember. The thing that he's going to have going against him is statistically, he's just going to have a hard time matching up with the other guys that are going to be eligible around this time, despite, his accomplishments. But I think of, you think of Clay Matthews, and you think of, Carl Mecklenburg. You think of these other guys who were great, great players, but are not Hall of Famers. And you think, boy, are we sure we're doing this right? Are we overly weighing guys who happen to be part of Super Bowl champions and missing some guys who were part of great teams, really good to great teams, that just because they didn't get over the hump, they're being neglected? And I think maybe some of that has happened in the Hall through the years, Gibby.
You bring up a great point about the Steelers. You've mentioned this before. He is definitely. I don't think he is, but because of the teams he played on and the things he did in the playoffs to help them win Super Bowls, it will ultimately probably push him in. Should he be in? Probably not. Will he get in? Probably. But this whole notion, the moment that someone retires, I've seen a couple tweets today, just because they had a good career doesn't mean they're Hall of Famers. Like, you could have a great career and not be a Hall of Famer. Like, it's okay.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it does. You don't need the gold jacket stamp of approval. Those things are for the most rarefied of air, and I think sometimes that I just think you grade some of these guys on a much more difficult sliding scale if they get I guess the simplest way to put it is the benefit of the doubt you get for being a Super Bowl champion is greater than I think it should be.
Yeah. It's the advantage.
Yeah.
I mean, that's I'm looking for a tweet I saw from Will Brinson this morning. And he said, Torrey Holt and Reggie Wayne are not in the Hall of Fame. Stop with any Julian Edelman to Canton talk until they are. Julian Edelman retired with fewer career receiving yards than Dwayne Bowe, Nate Washington, Brandon Cooks, and Jeremy Maclin. Like,
really? Maclin too?
Yeah.
I wouldn't have had that.
No, that's what it stuck out to me. Like, I don't think Reggie Wayne's a Hall of Famer. Reggie Wayne was a darn good wide receiver. And I don't know if Torrey Holt, but Torrey Holt won a Super Bowl. Reggie Wayne
Torrey Holt was I want to say it was Albert Breer this morning had this too. He said, in order to be a Hall of Famer, Nathan and I talk about this all the time, and we use, all pros. Were you an all pro? Like, all pros matter when it comes to Hall of Fame. How many first-team all pros were you? Like, you start to count those, which is why, last year we were talking about Michael Dean Perry, that maybe, like, there's never any talk about Michael Dean Perry, but he has the all pro nods, and he is a little bit undervalued in terms of how good he was here. I'm not saying he needs to be in the Hall of Fame, but his career here, I think, doesn't get enough attention for how great he was during the stint that he was great. But the one thing that Torrey Holt would have, and this was Breer's point, at some point to be a Hall of Famer for a certain stretch of time, you have to be among the top 5 players at your position in the game. And I think that's a fair, however you quantify that, to me, that's what it has to feel like. And I don't know if you look back on Julian Edelman, at no point was he one of the top 5 receivers during his time. Torrey Holt was. I mean, there was a time when Torrey Holt was the best receiver, or 1A, for a while in his career. So I think that's a nice thing to kind of come back to, is were you ever one of the top 5 position at your position. And again, this leads into this entire conversation that I don't want to take away from what was an awesome career. This guy played quarterback at Kent State. And
he was a 7th-round pick out of Kent State.
An incredible career.
And in reading some of the stories and whatnot, like, it was a local sports writer that reached out to Belichick and said, there's this guy at Kent State. He is one of the best athletes that I've ever seen. There's a place on your team for him. And that's what got him interested in him.
Crazy.
I mean,
absolutely crazy.
And congratulations. Guy's got rings. The guy, I mean, the second most postseason catches behind Jerry Rice. I mean, there are some records that you have.
Yeah.
Is it Hall of Fame worthy? I would say no, but I mean, it's, it doesn't diminish his career and what he did. And I guarantee the Patriots are going to put his number up in the rafters at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, he will be that guy, and that's good. That's awesome. I mean, that's what Clay has here.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's an incredible accomplishment. Belichick does that. There was a kid who played at Ohio State who was a walk-on football player named Nate Ebner, who was like on the All-USA Sevens rugby team, but was just an elite athlete. And I'll never forget when his name came up as drafted, and you said, geez, Belichick drafted Ebner. Like, he was kind of a walk-on guy, with Ohio. And all nice. He was a special teams captain for the Patriots for like 7-8 years. Like, he was great. And Belichick does a good job of finding those diamonds in the rough late in the draft. Speaking of the draft, Justin Fields and Trey Lance will have their second pro days. Fields and Lance will incorporate drills and throws that Shanahan uses in the 49ers practices, along with things they did during their initial workouts this year. This is as close as they'll get to a private workout for the 49ers under the rules in place for this offseason. We'll know in a couple of weeks if they impress the 49ers enough to be the choice at number 3. So this is because these guys can't go to facilities, right? That's why this is all happening.
I guess, but like if your Fields, there's another team that's coming to watch you with an kind of a big intent, and that's the Patriots. Like,
right,
you're going to run the 49er offense. I don't know if that's the Patriot offense. So I don't know if I agree with your second pro day catering to one group over another.
I don't know. And honestly, and I asked this of Nathan because I didn't know what the rules were on this last week when we talked about this. And I guess this is confirming what we thought, that because these guys can't go for private workouts, this was arranged in lieu of that. So, and I do think it's important that Belichick is going to this stuff and the Patriots are going to this stuff. And whether it's illusion for them or not, who knows? But the fact that they're there, I think, is a very, very big deal. It's always a very, very big deal when our buddy Sam Monson of Pro Football Focus joins the program. He will do so next. His latest mock draft out yesterday. It has us taking a linebacker, but not just any linebacker. We get into that coming up next. You'll listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Injuries during childbirth require experienced counsel. Call the lawyers at Elk & Elk for a clear answer as to what happened during your child's birth. Elk & Elk, a proud partner of your Cleveland Browns. Call 1-800-ELK-OHIO today. Time to get smarter, kids, as we head out on the hotline for a visit with our great friend Sam Monson, Pro Football Focus lead NFL analyst. Sam, we're going to get to your mock in a second, but before we get to that, if you'd permit me a few questions about where we are heading into the draft from an organization from your standpoint. And let's start with the Clowney stuff that is out there reportedly coming in today for a workout or a physical, and potentially what that fit would do for Andrew Berry and for this defense in terms of the reconstruction of it that's happened this offseason. Would you like the fit of Clowney with this defense?
Yeah, I like the fit of Clowney actually for both sides. I think it's a really good fit for Cleveland. I think it's a really good fit for Clowney, who has been, betting on himself now for a couple of years and keeps coming up snake eyes. The bet hasn't worked, and at some point he needs to have one of those seasons that kind of transforms that and shows that he can be the player that he wants to be to get the money he wants. So I think Cleveland's a great landing spot. They have a really good defensive line already. Obviously, Myles Garrett is the number one superstar. They've added some interior pass rush presence this season in the offseason with Malik Jackson. Jordan Elliott, I think, could potentially take a step forward in year two and really be part of that rotation. And then Clowney, for all that he hasn't become the dominant player that everybody thought he would be at draft time, he is a consistently good player. And he's one that probably gets undersold by the sacks. He's not a good sack artist, but neither is Brandon Graham. And Brandon Graham's been one of the best edge rushers in the NFL for the last decade. Clowney, I don't think is as good as that as an edge rusher, but he's really good against the run and does generate a lot of pressure, even if it doesn't always convert to sacks.
Yeah, Seb, I was going to ask you, we started with this a little bit yesterday with Clowney, that no, he probably has not been what he was drafted to be. I mean, Myles Garrett is what people thought he would be when he was drafted. But he's also probably underappreciated in terms of what he is. And in terms of what you guys do, and that's why I love so much about what you guys do, because there's a finite way to judge this. When you talk about his ability to set the edge, when you talk about his ability to be disruptive in the run game and to create pressure, what do you see on those fronts?
Yeah, it's funny. He came into the league, I think, probably overhyped. That one career highlight where he destroyed a running back against Michigan. Running back, by the way, who was like 5'7", 175 pounds. But that sort of got everyone excited about the crazy player that Jadeveon Clowney could be. And he never really, I don't think he ever was that guy, and he's never become that guy. But now it's swung all the way in the other direction. He's got 32 sacks since he came into the league, and now people look at him and say he's just not good. And the truth is somewhere in the middle. He's a very good player. He just is probably never going to be a devastating pass rusher. But as you said, he's an excellent run defender. His run stop rate is always really high. His average depth of tackle is really close to the line of scrimmage. He does make those impact plays. He's got the kind of power and length that causes real problems for offensive tackles in the run game, where they struggle to get their hands on him and avoid him getting around underneath and through those blocks to cause some real disruption. So even if you don't need him to generate any kind of pass rush, if you have Myles Garrett and the rest of those guys that bring the most pressure, Clowney can just be a complementary piece who stuffs the run and then brings a little bit of extra on pass rushing downs.
Yeah, I think I actually like the fit better than Watt, to be honest, if we can somehow pull it off here in the next 24 hours or so. I think it'd be a good one. I want to ask you about, before we get into the mocks, the three safety look that we keep hearing a lot about, the acquisition of John Johnson, Grant Delpit, provided he comes back healthy, and all indications are that he's having a great offseason, looks great. And then Ronnie Harrison as well. What Joe Woods ought to try to do here, the way that we understand it, again, we don't have quite the access that we used to have around here, but is have three guys that can all kind of do the same thing and come at offenses from a lot of different angles. In terms of those three guys' talent, and I realize you're projecting on Delpit because we haven't seen him in the pros yet, but we know what he was in college, provided he can get close to that. What type of problems will that have and create for opposing offenses, and do you like the idea of it?
Yeah, and we really like Delpit coming into the NFL, coming out of the draft. So I think it is reasonable to hope that he will be a positive player. Yeah, I think there's a lot of versatility that gives you. It gives you the creativity to, dump a linebacker, which isn't the strength of the team right now anyway. And generally in the NFL, linebackers are getting victimized more than any other position by this explosion of passing offense. Those are the guys that get picked on. If you can replace a linebacker in coverage with another safety or a guy who's a more natural coverage player, I think it does let you steal a march on everybody else and gives you a little bit more creativity and versatility to match up with some of these playmaking weapons that are being deployed from the tight end and running back position. So, yeah, I think it's a good potential move and allows them to do a lot and cause some real issues for teams while sort of maintaining the strength.
Sam, you guys have done a great job, as you always do in the lead up to this draft and breaking through these prospects. You put up a mock draft yesterday, and typically you guys do this based on your guys' rankings, but this was unique in that you played GM for all 32 NFL teams, which had to be a lot of fun. Which was the one, before we get to where you were going with us, what are some of the picks that you really had a fun time making for those teams that maybe you think those teams won't actually make?
Yeah, it's fun when you start looking at where the quarterbacks are going to land. We've been working on the basis that the 1 and 2 is set in stone. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence and Zach Wilson. And then the draft starts at 3. And what the 49ers are going to do, having traded up so far to get their quarterback. So once I gave them Justin Fields, who I still think makes the most sense to San Francisco, to Kyle Shanahan's offense, then everyone's sort of saying, look, Atlanta's going to trade out and the 4th quarterback goes there. But I just don't think that anyone that needs a quarterback at that point needs to jump as high as number 4. So then it starts to get interesting because the teams that are left that still need a quarterback actually get within striking distance of one. So the last 2 I ended up going with Denver jumping up to number 6 and snagging Trey Lance. And then Mac Jones, despite all the hype, falls all the way to number 11. And the Patriots were able to jump up and grab him. So I don't know if either of those moves are going to happen, but I think those are sort of pretty fun ways of both those teams actually successfully getting a quarterback that they think could start day one and be an upgrade.
Sam, you went Pitts at number 4 to Atlanta. If they do trade out of that for a quarterback team that wants to go take a quarterback at 4, and we were just having this conversation at the top of the hour, and you're Cincinnati, and you have the pick of Pitts, Chase, Sewell, where would you go?
It's funny because that's been the conversation or the debate for pretty much everybody for a while now, and usually it's just Chase and Sewell. And if you throw Pitts into it, I don't know that it necessarily changes things, but it's a great spot for Cincinnati because I don't think you can screw it up. It's basically any one of those picks is a massive upgrade for your team, will help you immediately right away and do huge things for Joe Burrow and for the entire offense. I think you can argue which is the more acute need and which one needs to be filled more, and what the draft is going to look like at the top of the second round. But ultimately, I think you just pick your favorite because I don't think you can get that pick wrong. If it was me personally, I think that Kyle Pitts is the most special player in this draft in terms of when you describe his skill set. Those guys don't come around very often. Players that can not just play tight end and be a Travis Kelce style player, but guys that could legitimately line up as an X receiver and win on the outside against number 1 cornerbacks in the NFL, in addition to lining up a tight end and being an inline blocker and doing all the traditional things that position asks of them. So I think Pitts is potentially the most special player in this draft. And the Browns, remember a couple of years ago, their sort of mantras in terms of what they do leaked, and one of them was you just don't pass on a blue chip player. I think you just don't pass on something as special as Kyle Pitts.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of feeling around him being that type of guy. We are in a unique spot in picking at 26, and if we can get this Clowney thing locked up, Sam, it's something that we've been talking about here on the show a lot. I think Andrew Berry can approach this draft pretty unfettered. yeah, you'd like to get better at corner, and you'd maybe like to add somebody there at some point just because of the injury stuff that's happened with Greedy and with Denzel. But at the same time, you've already improved the position from where you were a year ago. If you get a healthy Greedy Williams, Hill's in the mix as well, so you're already better than you were. He can almost approach this from our vantage point, Sam, of find me some guys with some elite traits. How did you approach his job at 26 when you did the GM mock?
Yeah, I think you're right that they've done what we always preach, which is you use free agency to fill needs, and then you get to the draft, and you can just draft the best players available. You don't have to focus on filling a hole on your starting roster, a guy that needs to come in and start immediately. You can just pick the best players and see how that lands. And I think you're always better off doing that. The Browns have done a great job in free agency ticking off those needs so that they do have that freedom to hit the draft and just select the players that they think can be great. I went with, JOK from Notre Dame, this kind of linebacker who plays that sort of overhang position in college that doesn't really exist at the NFL level, but I think is becoming a more and more important or coveted skill set because those guys are used to playing in space and playing in coverage and going up against elite receiving playmakers as opposed to taking on fullbacks in the hole the way linebackers used to have to do 10 years ago. So he's I think a really talented player. Had like the second highest coverage grade in the slot in the entire country last year as a linebacker ostensibly, which is crazy, pretty much unprecedented. So I think he would come in, fill a hole at linebacker, but also give them even more creativity to, match up on defense and basically line up opposite any possible combination of receivers to get thrown at them.
Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is the guy out of Notre Dame you're talking about, JOK for short, and he is a guy that we've talked about here on this show. This is the way that certainly that we view linebackers, not one where you were going to go spend a bunch of money in free agency on linebackers, although we like what we've done there, and I think we like Jacob Phillips more than the people in the NFL circles realize we like Jacob Phillips. But I do think what JOK presents is that elite trait, and now all of a sudden you have him flying around out there, and he could be a difference maker. And I would love this pick if he falls. I would absolutely love it for us. Are there other players of that similar elite trait that you could see potentially falling down? I know a lot of people think Zaven Collins has some of that.
Yeah, I think there's a few. They're in a pretty good zone right there in terms of some of those types of players. The only linebacker I think that I had going off the board before that pick is Micah Parsons from Penn State, who I don't think is as natural a fit in that kind of defense, and I think other guys would be a much more natural spot. It's also right in the thick of when I think that second wave of cornerbacks might go off the board. So if they do think that they're not done at cornerback and they can't trust maybe Greedy Williams, given what we've seen from him so far, and they want to add another body to the mix, guys like Greg Newsome or Asante Samuel Jr., I think would be in that kind of range and could be really intriguing picks as guys that play the ball extremely well and have really nice movement skills, even if they're not, sort of monster press man corners.
Yeah, it certainly does feel that way. Just in general, what positions do you like in this draft? And especially considering where we're picking, where's the value, where's the depth? One of the things that we talk about on this show quite a bit, and I feel pretty strongly about, is that wide receiver is a position that the NFL is going to start to view almost like running back, because there's so many talented ones that are coming year in and year out, and unless you have the elite traits like Tyreek Hill has or Julio Jones in terms of the physicality, that those guys, the money may not be there for them just because of how much talent's coming in the position. The depth of positions, what ones do you like?
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think wide receivers, there's a ton of them coming out in this draft as well, and that's 2 or 3 years in a row now where there have just been a huge amount of wide receivers, all with talent and ability to play coming into the NFL. So I think you're right. It makes sense for teams to start to wait on wide receivers, knowing that they can pick them up in the second and third rounds, and there won't be a huge drop-off between the guys at the top of the draft. It's another strong year for wide receivers. I think there's a ton of edge rushers in this draft, even if there isn't a clear Chase Young number one superstar. the COVID year and a lot of these guys opting out, it sort of made the landscape for edge rushers a little bit chaotic and a little bit more of a gamble than it normally is. But I think there's a lot of them, and they're all very tightly bunched, kind of at the middle of the first round, the back of the first round in the same sorts of areas. I think it's good offensive line draft as well, which you can't always say heading into a draft. I think there's a lot of talented offensive linemen this year, which, Cleveland had, I think, the best offensive line in the NFL last year on paper. So it might not be a position they're targeting beyond depth, but for teams outside of the Browns, there's a lot of teams that still need desperate help at offensive line, and it's a great year for them.
Yeah, it certainly is. It's a great year to pay attention to everything Pro Football Focus does, as it is every year, especially this time of year. They are the best. Sam, appreciate your time a great deal. Thanks, bud.
Thanks, guys.
All right, that's our buddy Sam Monson, Pro Football Focus. Lots of good stuff there. I think that, you kind of could talk yourself into a lot of things, but I think one thing you can say as a Browns fan is all these quarterbacks going, that helps you tremendously. If there is a run on corners, potentially that is something that maybe you don't go with at 26. And I think the word of the day, guys, you get hit over the head with it 1,000 times. It's elite traits. That's what you're looking for. And Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah is a guy who just flies. I mean, he flies. And if he were somebody who were to fall to us, it goes kind of back to what Chris Sims was saying yesterday about how this defense needs its Bobby Wagner. I don't want to put that type of hype on this kid. But if you put that in there and you've now got a linebacker who can fly and 3 safeties who can run around and cover everybody, I love that stat about him being graded so highly covering in the slot as a linebacker, which is pretty unheard of. That allows so much versatility for Joe Woods. You don't know where the blitzes are coming from. You don't know who's dropping. You don't know who's covering. That allows for a lot of confusion. And I think one thing that was slept on a little bit last year is the job that Joe Woods did. I don't think people fully appreciate how handicapped we were in the secondary last year, just with injury, let alone some of the situations we were in. That's all going to be changed next year. And I think this would be a pick that I'd love to see this one. I think this would be a fun one.
I think you'd sprint to the podium. I mean, I think there's probably a good chance he won't be there. I think there's probably a really good chance he won't be there. But you mentioned the run on quarterbacks. You're going to have a run on wide receivers at the start. It now appears more and more you're going to have a run on corners. Like there's going to be 4 guys potentially off the board. And now I'm seeing the more mocks you read, there's more offensive linemen being picked now in the first 20 picks than I've seen at any point this offseason. I mean, you're talking 4 or 5 offensive linemen.
We saw that last year.
Yeah. And and maybe not necessarily in the top 10, but you're going to have, 3 or 4 go between 10 and probably 22. And that's just pushing your linebackers back. It's pushing your edge rushers back. We're going to get to Mel Kiper's mock here coming up in 10 minutes. The first edge rusher off the board is at 18. And I mean, that's – and edge rusher is one of the top 5 most important positions, if not top 3.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, for sure.
And
yeah.
At 18?
Oh, yeah, no question. And if that happens, too, Gibby, if that happens, you can look at getting that type of player at 26 and remember all of the ammo we have. We are not – I don't think we're going to pick 9 guys. Like, we just don't have the roster spots. So you have a lot of ammo where you could move up in the second, move up a couple of spots in the first to get who you want. There's a lot of options there to move up and be creative. And if you can get 2 elite trait guys end of the first, second round, which I think you're going to be able to do, that may – honestly, it may end up being at receiver, too, in the second round where guys fall there. Like Rondale Moore is a guy to pay attention to, in my view. You want to talk about elite traits, he has them. And that is a guy who could fall. You might be able to get him in the second round, the third round even. Jeez, he is an electric player, and that's something that I think you're going to be able to do. It's a tremendous position of strength that we're in as a franchise to be able to approach the draft in this manner. It is, and it's going to be really fun, exciting, and almost impossible to forecast because we just don't have any idea what's going to happen in front of us. So it's something you're just going to be on the edge of your seat. It's longer than you're used to waiting, but that's a good thing. You mentioned the Mel Kiper Jr. mock draft. His 2-round mock draft was out this morning on ESPN. We'll go over his picks for us. Guess what? He addressed both wide receiver and linebacker in these, but not the names you're used to seeing. We get to that coming up next. Cleveland Browns Daily, 850 ESPN Cleveland. Second hour here, Cleveland Browns Daily, 850 ESPN Cleveland, and Beau Bishop here for my friends at Northeast Factory Direct. If you're sick and tired of your outdated kitchen, and you know that you are, this is the perfect time to upgrade. Go see my friends at Northeast Factory Direct. They've got high-quality, name-brand furniture, hot tubs, about half the price as the fancy retail stores charge you. But at Northeast, and this is the big part, you can get high-quality cabinets for 60 to 70% less than at the expensive kitchen remodeling stores. And it's really simple. Make an appointment, bring in some basic measurements, and they're going to walk you through everything else. The best part is the appointment and the design especially are free. That's huge. Northeast Factory Direct cuts out all the costs associated with traditional stores so you can buy nice stuff at really nice prices. They also have 0% financing available. Incredible. So if you're thinking about remodeling your kitchen, it is simple. Go to northeastfactorydirect.com. Schedule your appointment today. Some interesting league news as the NFL and the NFLPA kind of jockeying back and forth on this, the NFL offseason and what it's going to look like. And what are we, Gibby? What did you say, a week from yesterday?
Yeah.
With OTAs?
This coming Monday, we're supposed to have players back in the building, technically, for OTAs. Yeah, and you saw the message from J.C. Treader and the NFLPA over the weekend that, hey, don't go in there. So this is going to be a push and pull from both sides for a while. And I think in response to that, this from Tom Pelissero, NFL.com, the NFL's informed clubs today that any team employee who refuses a COVID-19 vaccination without, quote, a bona fide medical or religious ground will be barred from Tier 1 or Tier 2 status, thus have restricted access within the team facility and not work directly with players per sources. Bona fide medical or religious ground that's interesting language on that. The other thing that I think is a little tricky is, the information today with the J&J vaccine and the pause on that. But I think from the fan perspective, Tier 1 and Tier 2, last year during the season, our Tier 1 and Tier 2 were basically just players and coaches and GMs, like front office luminaries, right? Correct. It did not. We were, at best, last fall, we were Tier 3.
And you guys even were obviously on the radio team, and Nathan went to games and traveled to games, and he was never more than a Tier 3, was he?
Correct. Yeah, we were Tier 3 when we came back in the fall, and that was through training camp. And then once the season started, we were basically you're in one room. When you walk in the building, you get tested at the front door, and you go right to your room. And do not pass go, do not collect $200, nothing.
Right. Yeah. I think what we all, certainly what we all had hoped for is that by the time we get to next fall, there is, I'm not naive enough to think that it'll be back to normal. I don't think that, I think it's going to come too quickly, and I don't know that it's going to be that way. But my hope is that you can be close to that. 70-80% of that you can get back to. When we're doing the coaches show, we're in the same room as coach recording it. Hopefully that's where we are by the time we get to that point. But this is also, I think, a direct kind of reaction to the comments from the NFLPA over the weekend about safety and all of that, and the NFL saying, hey, we're going to have it exactly like we had it last year, no different. If you're not vaccinated, you're not going to be in a Tier 1 and Tier 2. You're going to be It's their way of addressing the safety concerns of the NFLPA. Is I think what this news here today is, and so we'll see where it goes. Mock of the day goes to Mel Kiper Jr. 2-round mock draft out this morning at ESPN.com. At pick number 26, he has us taking linebacker Jamin Davis out of Kentucky. Wasn't Jamin one of the guys in the Building the Browns episode on one of the Zoom things that they used? I think he was in one of those. One of the scenes on Building the Browns over the weekend. I just watched it this morning, and I'm pretty sure I saw his name supered on one of those virtual visits that they were going through. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he was. Here is what Kiper says about Davis. Davis is another defender who is rising since the season ended. He's really only a one-year starter. He started one game in 2019, but was tremendous last season, 96 tackles, 3 interceptions, and a sack. Davis was all over the field making plays. He could play any of the linebacker spots for Cleveland's 4-3 defense. The Browns could also target an edge rusher with this pick if they do sign, Jadeveon Clowney. And we haven't spent any time talking about him. This is the first time I saw his name, I'm pretty sure, was this morning on Building the Browns when I was watching it. But this is the first time that I've seen it in any of the mocks. You do note that Zaven Collins was still on the board with this pick when we picked, but now this is the second one that has us going linebacker who can run in the first round. And it's something that 2 months ago you would have said, hard to see it. I don't know if we'd ever use a first rounder on a linebacker, but when you start to open your mind about what a linebacker can do, it's the ability to run and cover that kind of changes your perception on it. It seems like this Davis kid would do that, Gibby.
Well, we talked about it yesterday in our linebacker room, and Jacob Phillips. And, I think people underestimating what he can be and what he can do for this linebacker room. But, yeah, I mean, you have to deal with Travis Kelce. You potentially have to deal with Kyle Pitts if he's in the AFC. I mean, you're going to
Yep.
You've got some things that you're going to have to deal with, and you have athletic tight ends that are more wide receiver than tight end. You're going to need linebackers that can keep up with them. You need edge and you need corner, in my opinion, but that's my opinion, and I don't know what that counts for anything, but Davis seems like a good kid, like a fat. I'm concerned at why all of a sudden he's rising right now.
Well, it could be something where, sometimes you get wind of people having interest in guys and they start to rise. I mean, you see this in recruiting where all of a sudden Ohio State, Alabama recruits a kid and they go from being a 4-star to a 5-star. So if whispers start to go around that certain teams who strategically draft well consistently have an interest, that's how a guy can pop up the list a little bit. I do think there's a chance that, and this goes back to what I was talking about. This all comes full circle from the position of this isn't someone we would normally consider, but because we don't need anything, this guy's elite. So let's grab him and put him in the mix and see what happens. I don't know as much about this kid as I know about JOK from Notre Dame, so I'll do a little work and see what I see on that front. But I do think the thought process is pretty sound there. And in the second round, Mel has us taking wide receiver Dwayne Eskridge out of Western Michigan. Why can't Eskridge do? He played wide receiver, corner, returned punts and kicks at Western Michigan. He averaged 23 yards per catch, had 8 receiving touchdowns last season. The Browns brought back Rashard Higgins, have Donovan Peoples-Jones waiting in the wing, but they have to get one more consistent production out of their number 3 receiver. If they take Eskridge, they'll get a boost in the return game as well. I'll tell you what I'm curious about is Dwayne Eskridge, and again, Mel's knocking it out of the park in terms of guys that we have not discussed, and Eskridge is another one of those guys that we've not discussed. What I'm curious about on his front, Gibby, is what is the height situation you're looking at there, because that would be, so he's 23, so he's a little bit older. Let me see if I can get a height here. I'm on the NFL.com site trying to grab his size. So 5'9", 190. So then what you would be saying, and on the notes here, because you're a good job at it, you note that Rondale Moore is still on the board. So I've seen Rondale Moore. I've seen what he did to Ohio State firsthand. He didn't play much as a sophomore. He opted out, then opted back in last year. Rondale Moore is an electric human being. That's not to say that Eskridge isn't. He very well, according to Mel, is. But if Moore was there, it would be hard to pass on him from my vantage point. They would know. They've done the due diligence. But I would have a hard time passing on Moore if he were there and you wanted to go wide receiver in the second round.
That's my whole thing. I mean, Rondale Moore goes right after Eskridge here at pick number 60 to the Saints.
Yeah.
So
and he would do the return game bump up
that you could potentially have.
Yeah, and Moore would have the same abilities. I was curious if Eskridge wasn't familiar with him, so I was curious if he was 6'3", 6'4", had some sort of a height advantage that Moore doesn't have, but he's not. He's
Moore's
kind of
only
a water
5'7".
bug guy the way. Yeah, they're both water bugs, really. I mean, Eskridge is 5'9", so it's really negligible in that sense. Moore has that make you miss thing in him that we've seen, and this kid may too. It's just that we're not as familiar. Some other takeaways from Mel's mock 1, 2, and 3. He has Mac Jones to San Francisco and says that there's just so much whispers in the NFL, so much smoke around Mac Jones to San Francisco to ignore. He has Miami trading back up to take tight end Kyle Pitts, trading back up to 4 to get Pitts to help out Tua Tagovailoa, and trading with with Atlanta to be able to do so, and the cost might not be that big for them to be able to do that. He has Jamar Chase lasting to number 7 to Detroit. I can't imagine it. I just can't imagine it. I can't. I'd love that pick for Detroit, but I can't see a scenario where Chase. To me, he's going to Cincinnati. I'd be shocked if he wasn't in Cincinnati.
I mean, you would have the Bengals. He has the Bengals taking Sewell out of Oregon, the offensive tackle.
Mm-hmm.
The Falcons move back 2 spots, accumulate some picks, and then take Trey Lance out of North Dakota State. You're right. I mean, is Jamar Chase the number 3 player in this draft?
I mean, he might be, but I don't think he's getting past Cincinnati. I mean, I think Cincinnati takes him. I think they might take him over Pitts, even if Pitts were on there. I don't think they'll take Sewell. And I think, like what Sam said earlier, there's a lot of offensive line talent in this draft. You know that Joe Burrow loves Chase. Their connection was magical. To me, that's a no-brainer if you're Cincinnati. Pittsburgh taking running back Najee Harris at 24. They're kind of the opposite of us. They have to get some players at position, specifically at running back. They have, with Connor gone, they have no consistent run game at all. And with Ben's arm being what it is, they have got to get somebody who can do a lot of things and be a power runner, and Harris, certainly would be that. You'd have to be careful anytime you're drafting an Alabama running back, with the exception of Derrick Henry. It's tough, as we know all too well, because those guys get a lot of wear and tear on the tread down there. He has the Ravens taking Terrence Marshall Jr. at number 27. It does feel like the Ravens will go receiver at 27. They tried everything they could in free agency to get one. Nobody wanted to go there, and so it does seem that that would be a position of that they would covet there at 26. Greg Rousseau, a lot of talk of him dropping. He drafts to 35, the defensive end out of Miami, and then Tutu Atwell, who's a Z favorite, lasts to 49 to Arizona. How many receivers can they have?
I don't know. And by the way, I'm not sure their quarterback can get them the ball.
Well, I think you have to worry a little bit about. I mean, we remember seeing him at the combine. Like,
yeah,
that dude. He's a little dude, man. He's an incredible athlete, but he's a little dude. He's got a really strong arm. He throws a beautiful ball, but you do have to worry about hits accumulating, and there would be the possibility of that. But they have so many receivers out there. To add another one. Interesting. We're getting close.
The one thing that I would. That's that area. Tutu Atwell at 49. And you mentioned it earlier. This is the area, like the Browns did last year when they went and they got Grant Delpit. You might not see him make a move on day 1, but this is where they use some of those picks maybe on a day 2, either second or third round, and move up if their guy is on the board, like within 10 picks of where they're going.
Yeah.
I think this reeks of, if they have their pick and they know they're going to have one of them, at a 48, 49, even like a 52, they pick at 59, I could totally see them moving up here.
We have the extra third, right? So that's your ability.
And an extra fourth, I believe. Okay.
So that's where you can start to flex a little bit and move up and get into a position that you want to get a real difference maker. And receiver does make a lot of sense to me. It's good future planning as well for us as you think about Jarvis and Odell and just getting older and all of those things, and you're looking for a little more speed at the position. So I think those things could happen. We'll ask John Ledyard about all of this. He's our great friend, NFL draft analyst, writes for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, reporter, of course, for the Pewter Report. He will join us at the bottom of the hour. You listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. Beau Bishop here for my friends at Weather Seal Home Services. Need a roof replacement? Would you like to replace your roof for the final time? We know that you would. You know that you would. That's the benefit of choosing a metal roof from Weather Seal. Metal roof technology, materials, styles, and colors. They've improved significantly, guys. They are beautiful, nearly indestructible, and they're affordable, especially with Weather Seal. Plus, with a new metal roof, Weather Seal includes a 6-inch gutter upgrade and up to 7 years, zero-interest financing. That's right, 7 years, zero interest on that financing. Call my guys at 877-351-SEAL or visit weathersealhomeservices.com for more information. As we go around the sports world today, a little quiet on the sports front, but we did see that the Masters had their lowest ratings since 1993. To me, Gibbe, and I talked about this a little bit yesterday, who are you buying into on that leaderboard? For the non-diehard golf fan who doesn't just like to watch Augusta National as a rite of spring, who's bringing you to the table? And honestly, even if the big guns were in it, are any of them? None of them transcend. None of them are guys. You have to think about like how many Masters Tiger Woods has played in the last 20+ years, and Tiger Woods being in the hunt at Augusta, like that drives ratings. There's nobody on that tour right now that drives the non-golf fan to the television. The Masters, the star, if Tiger's not there, and you could argue even when he is the course. That's what you're coming to see. It's the course. And if you aren't a golf person, that's not enough.
That was my wife's argument on Sunday because I was watching it with her, and she goes, "This is pretty exciting." I said, "It's actually kind of boring. It's quite the opposite."
Yeah.
Like, and my wife wouldn't know. And
right.
She said, like, "Do you think like this will affect the ratings?" I said, "Absolutely." I said, "There's no Tiger," and she's like,
"Correct."
Really? And she gets the NFL, she gets the NBA, she gets MLB, but she's not a golfer, so she's not in that same spot. I just said, I go, Tiger Woods not being there will negatively impact this weekend.
Tremendously.
Until Tiger Woods can't play golf anymore or can't play the Masters or can't play in a major, for age, health, whatever, he will always be the driving force. Because right now there is no one else. You got a bunch of people that are like that tier 1, tier 2 border, but they're not superstars.
And yeah, they're all fine. But I mean, the best players right now, and really the best players who you would know, even the non-traditional fan would know a little bit, the names that you would know, like none of them made the cut. Koepka didn't make the cut. John DJ didn't make the cut. Obviously, and neither did McIlroy. None of those guys made the cut. DeChambeau's getting a lot of love. He wasn't in the mix in any way. So then you say, well, okay, who was there? Even Justin Thomas, who played, who did like the PA for the Tiger Woods match and all that stuff, like he wasn't in the mix. So you're talking about a Sunday that was Matsuyama, Zalatoris, Xander Schauffele. Who in the heck knows? If I said, who is Will Zalatoris, who's Xander Schauffele, who's Hideki Matsuyama to my wife right now, she would not know any of them. None of them. Not one of them. And I mean, because we watch it, she would be aware. But if before the weekend, would have none. And she watches sports because she's got 4 dudes in here, and we watch a lot of sports. But they just don't transcend. The only name that anybody would have any familiarity with was Spieth.
Exactly. Yeah.
So.
No, I mean, that's I think golf still has a problem. Because I think they've got some good players, but they don't have superstars.
No, the thing that golf has is it will always have, and you remember when you used to get the Sports Illustrated and the Golf Plus was always in it? Remember that?
Yes.
So the Golf Plus always was there because of the sponsors that wanted to be associated with golf always paid for the Golf Plus, right? So golf in that standpoint is safe. From a rating standpoint, from a money standpoint, I don't know how it's going to continue to be. It seems impossible to me that it can all stay where it is, where the interest will never be what it was. Tiger Woods was a one of one. You're not going to see that again, where you have one guy who transcends the tour, and that's what he did. I mean, the famous Game of Thrones. I don't want to be a spoke on the wheel. I want to break the wheel. He broke the wheel.
Yeah.
And there's nobody There's nobody in that mix. I mean, even guys who are kind of fun, like my kids like Ricky Fowler. Did he even play the Masters?
I don't know. I didn't see him.
I have no idea. I didn't see him once.
And I think the other problem that you're having now is, you mentioned it, like Tiger Woods used these other tournaments as warm-ups for, the big four. Are we going to start seeing that trend where, you're already seeing guys that are playing select tournaments. They're not playing every week. They're picking and choosing. They're playing their favorites. They're not playing every single week.
No, you're right. They're not. Okay, so Fowler did not play. I don't know that he qualified.
Huh.
Did he not qualify?
Yeah, but I mean,
will not play the tournament this year. He's ineligible because he hasn't qualified for the Masters. So there you go. Well, there was a guy who was a next guy who had an incredible connection to kids in the game, and I do wonder. I thought about this with Rory before too. I remember there was this. I remember seeing this like after Rory, when he won the majors and he had didn't he have like the Tag Heuer ad that was out there that was that something in the Hall of Fame, and it showed him. Didn't he his net worth is pretty remarkable.
Well,
and you just wonder, like, what is your motivation to go? He's worth $150 million.
Yeah, does Rory McIlroy care?
Is he going to grind?
If I get hot and I play well, great. If not,
right?
Whatever. I'm hopping on my G6 and
I'm gone.
I'll see you at my next tournament that I choose to play.
That's why the great ones, the Tigers, the Brady's, the ones who have it all and still relentlessly grind. Man, that type of greatness, that's what separates. So, yeah, I mean, it's disappointing from that standpoint, but, I think it's kind of a reflection of, I think in terms of it being a record low, it's more of a reflection of who is on the leaderboard than anything else, as it just was a lot of unrecognizable names. All right, John Ledyard up next. We will talk draft with him, Tampa Bay Buccaneers reporter for the Pewter Report. Get his views on what the Bucs, the Super Bowl champions, have done this offseason to make another run at it. Here's a little hint. It's been pretty good. We will get to that and get his thoughts on the draft coming up next. You're listening to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. If you live and breathe football, you know sometimes keeping your priorities straight can be a challenge. Unfortunately, the same can be true when you gamble. If you find your gambling is affecting other parts of your life, get some help, get some tips on responsible gambling at KeepItFunOhio.com. Before we get to our good buddy John Ledyard, just some a little bit of breaking news here in the NFL, and Gibby and I talked about this at the top of the hour. This is a statement from the NFLPA on behalf of the Denver Broncos players. Playing in the NFL is a dream of our players who work tirelessly year-round to perform in America's greatest game. They go on to say that the risks are too great and too serious remain with COVID-19, and they will not be participating in OTAs. So that is, I think, probably the first of what could be many of these. We'll see. But, I mean, it's one of those things you could kind of forecast coming based on what the NFLPA had to say over the weekend on this front. And so with that, we head out on the hotline for a visit with our good buddy John Ledyard. He, of course, covers the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, your Super Bowl champion Tampa Bay Bucks, for the Pewter Report, and also one of the best NFL draft analysts around. John, before we get to that, the bloom from that Super Bowl championship, and boy, the Bucks went right to work, and to me looked like they could be even better. What is it like having Tom Brady be a part of things and getting all of this band back together, maybe even better next year?
It's really fun, honestly. I think there are not a lot of NFL organizations that are really well run from a maybe business standpoint. Maybe they can maximize that part of it. But from a football standpoint, to be able to draft and use free agency wisely and have kind of some smart usage of application of analytics, but also like contract structure, the Bucks have never been known as one of those organizations, or at least it hasn't been for years. But I think they're starting to be known for that again, and it's exciting the way how Jason Light has grown as a GM, the people he surrounded himself with, and now that he finally has a coaching staff that I think everybody really believes in. It, you're kind of seeing it manifest itself. He's drafted very, very well, put this team in position to be successful for at least a few years here, and if they can find another quarterback after Brady, maybe even longer. So it's a fun time to be covering the team for sure.
After Brady, man, I mean, he could go to 50. What's? I mean,
True.
You got another 5-6 years, don't you?
I mean, that's definitely a possibility. The way that man works, I mean, I won't rule out anything.
It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy how that he's playing at this level at this age. What everybody wants to find is the next Tom Brady, and who knows if that's in this draft or not. Before we get into some of the specific positions, just big picture talent in this draft, what do you like? What do you have some concerns with from a position standpoint, John?
Well, I have concerns with the defensive side of the ball, period. I think it's a good corner class. Other than that, you might find some like mid-round type of players on the defensive side, maybe lots of those types. But the problem is in a draft like this, you're going to be taking those players in the early rounds. And so are you going to get that kind of return, the first-round caliber return from defensive players that you take in this class? Defensive tackle class is rough. I would not touch these guys. I would wait to draft a D tackle until the mid-rounds. You might not get a great player, but you'll get a player that's worthy of a mid-round pick rather than using a first-round pick or a second-round pick on a third or fourth-round talent. So you just got to be smart about the D tackle position in this class. The edge rusher, I mean, tons of promise, lots of athletes, but just very little production, very little tape where you were like, wow, this guy's going to be a dominant NFL player. We've had that for the past few years. Obviously, all know what that looked like with Myles Garrett. We've had that with the Bozas and Chase Young and Khalil Mack before them, and to some people's eyes, Jadeveon Clowney as well. But, I think that this draft doesn't have a player quite like that. I love Jalen Phillips, but I don't know that there's still questions with him, too. And so lots of questions on the defensive side of the ball. It's a very good offensive draft, offensive tackle, interior offensive line, quarterback at the top 5 at least, wide receiver, depending on your type, is a good class. Running back has some good talents at the top. Tight ends weak after Pitts, but overall it's an offense-dominated class, and I think it's going to play out that way in the NFL for the second straight year, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of gets to, kind of a theory of mine that I've been running out quite a bit here is that especially at wide receiver, and I think we saw this a little bit in free agent, we saw it manifest, that just the NFL is going to start viewing the wide receiver position, unless you are elite, it's going to start viewing it like running back, that we'll just draft one. Like, we're not going to pay, really good. We're not going to pay really good receivers. We're not going to lock them into long contracts because it's the depth of the position, and it seems like it's that way this year again at wide receiver.
Right. I think at the top you'll see Waddle and Chase, kind of be above that as what you're indicating in terms of I think they'll still be highly valued because teams see real game changers with those two. Devontae Smith may fall into that umbrella for some teams, probably falls into that ranking for enough teams that he'll still be drafted pretty highly. After that, though, I really wonder if what you're saying is going to kick into effect and how much it influences things. Because there's a lot of good receivers, but I don't think there's any game changers or even the potential to be game changers really after that. I think there's good number twos, good number threes, lots of slot-only types, that are exciting, like Rondale Moore, Elijah Moore, those kinds of players that I think can be fun in the NFL. Kadarius Toney, Amari Rodgers. But what are you paying? What's the, you're never going to run your offense through a guy like that. So, what are you paying for those kind of guys? What are you giving up to get those kind of guys, and are they worth it? Or can you get a comparable guy in the third round or the fourth round when other teams have already paid for the bigger names, and you're getting a pretty comparable player for much cheaper? A lot of teams, I think, are going to see the wide receiver position that way when it comes to the guys that aren't the top tier type talent.
Talking to our good buddy John Ledyard, NFL draft analyst, Tampa Bay Buccaneers reporter for the Pewter Report. John, before we get into some of our positions of need and guys you like specifically at some of these positions, I want to ask you about the quarterbacks just because I respect your opinion so much. Obviously, Lawrence going 1, feels like Wilson's obviously going 2. How do you view this quarterback class in terms of where their potential is and how you would rank them?
I would have Lawrence and Fields in that top tier together in my mind. Both are really, really good players. Lawrence, I do think there are bouts of some inconsistency and inaccuracy that worry me a little bit, but he's got such a natural feel for the game. He's a great athlete. He manages pressure really well, and he's had plenty of encounters with pressure in big games over the years, and he's managed it well. So I love that part of it. I don't think anything is going to be too big for him. Fields has to manage pressure a little bit well, recognize it pre-snap a little bit better. There's times where he needs to move quicker through things, but in terms of talent, all the talent in the world and the consistency already, that's already in place too. The accuracy to all levels of the field, rare for a guy with his traits to offer that accuracy as well. So I'm a huge Fields fan. I think he does show that he can move through progressions on tape. Sometimes that needs to happen a little bit quicker. Zach Wilson, who I like a lot, I still think that's where he needs to grow the most. He needs to come off of concepts a little bit quicker. He had all day at BYU to throw the football, and he took advantage of that, and it made their offense really fun and exciting. He needs to speed up that process. Otherwise, things are going to get real touch and go for him in the NFL. It happens a lot quicker against that better competition, and that's going to be the adjustment for him. That's why he's a little bit more boom or bust than we talk about, but the boom is significant if he hits, because not many guys with his arm talent and his accuracy. So lots of talent at the top of the class for sure. Trey Lance, Mac Jones, they offer things I like a lot as well, but I'd say Fields and Lawrence to me are the top two guys in the class.
Yeah, it's kind of the way I think about it too. Let's go to positions that we kind of think we could be eyeing at 26. And I think at number 1 on that list is corner. So the question is that too late in the draft to get – it appears that there's a separation, like there's a first 4 and then the next group of corners. Is 26 too late to get an elite corner? And if it is, who is one of those guys who could fall? And then in the next group, who do you like most?
I think you can still get one. It really depends what Caleb Farley's medical situation is. And I know he said recently that everything went great, and that's him talking. So we're not sure. We just don't know. If his medicals are a concern, then he probably won't be a first-round pick. It's not like he just balled out in 2020 and then had to get a little cleanup after the season. Like, this guy didn't play football for a year, then had to get something else done that was going to prevent him from even being able to test. So there's just lots of unknowns, right? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how teams are going to treat it. We haven't seen this opt-out situation before, coupled with injuries, coupled with weird medical rechecks that may not give every team the assurance they need to that the guy is worth taking in the first round. So we'll see what happens with Farley. On tape, I think that he's a very talented player. He's got a ways to go still, I think, to get to where he can be as a player. I wish he would have played in 2020 for that reason. I understand completely, obviously, why he didn't. And then I think the other guy is Greg Newsome. His stock has kind of risen very quickly, and he's very good on tape. The only question is Newsome has missed games in all 3 seasons that he's been at Northwestern. So all 3 seasons he was on the field, he's missed at least 3 games due to injury. How do teams treat that? Do they think those types of injuries will keep creeping back up? Because his tape looked like he should be definitely a top 32 pick from this past season. But he only played 6 games, and before that, nobody was talking about him as a first-round pick. So, again, we have so many fascinating evaluations, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Even if we like guys, there's significant risk involved in projecting them high. So those are the 2 names that you think might be there. Obviously, Surtain and then J.C. Horn will be gone at that point in time. And then Asante Samuel's the other guy that I think has a chance to sneak in there. I mean, I know he's not big, but he press man coverage all over his tape. He's got tons of reps in that regard. He plays very physical. He's not like his dad in terms of tackling. Like, he will come tackle. And so I like Asante Samuel Jr. too, and I think that he can be a really good player in the NFL. He has a chance to be one of the next guys off the board probably as that second group comes in.
That is a name that you like to hear, certainly, and one we're familiar with. I think most people think the next position that we would go, and some people may even have it as the number one priority for us, is edge. I do think if the Jadeveon Clowney thing happens, that kind of unlocks you from having to go edge. But if the right guy were to fall, I could see Andrew Berry pouncing on it. Late first-round edge guys, who do you like there?
They could all be there. It's hard to know again. I mean, Jalen Phillips to me is clearly the best edge defender in the class. I don't think anybody's close to him on tape. Testing, there were some guys close to him, but then when you try to use the tape as the tiebreaker, it's clear. He's light years beyond Jason Away and Joseph Asai, who tested really, really well, even well beyond Kwity Paye, who tested well. Also, I don't think there's an edge comparable to Jalen Phillips in terms of what happens on the field. I can't speak to whatever happened off the field or in his personal life at UCLA, and then stepping away from football, and there were injuries and there were concussions and a wrist injury, and that's all gray area to me. I know what I've heard. I don't know what to trust this time of year. I don't like to repeat it. So I'll just say he's a great player. He's a great athlete. The upside is through the roof, and he's already on his way there. From last season, we could see that. If he's there, I mean, it's hard to pass on him. He could easily be a top 10 player in this class. He also could easily be a complete bust. So we will have to see kind of what happens with Phillips. But in terms of talent, he's definitely the top guy. We'll see what happens with Ojulari. Is he there or not? He could be an option. I think he's more likely to be off the board before that pick. Then you have guys that are like great athletes, but totally unproven on tape, like Jason Away, who had 0 sacks this past season, but will enter the NFL as one of the most athletic edge defenders with great size still, one of the most athletic edge defenders to ever really play in the league, to be honest. So you are betting on the Donnell Hunter upside and outlier process with him in terms of production, because he had 7 career college sacks and none came in his 7 games this past season. So it's a big risk with guys like Away. It's a big risk with guys like Osai, who are very athletic and explosive, but are very much still learning the position. And then maybe you think about a Kwity Paye type of player, but he's still very raw as well. Michigan misused him, I thought. They played him over the tackle or a 3 technique a lot of the time, outside shoulder at the guard, and he just did that. He is a speed bend pass rusher. I don't care if he looks like Rambo and he's jacked and everything. Yeah. He doesn't play on the inside. You misuse him when you put him there, and that cost him development as an edge rusher, I think. So, again, the character is going to be so important with figuring these guys out. Who wants to be great and is willing to put in that kind of time, because a lot of development is needed, and the team that picks the guy who's the most committed might end up being the one that picks the right player in the end.
A lot of great points there on those guys. Agree with a lot of them, especially the Kwity Paye point, and that kind of follows into a lot of what's happened at Michigan and we benefited with that with Donovan Peoples-Jones, where his talent just was not maximized at Michigan, and clearly he had plenty of it. A position that I would say this front office, 2 months ago you'd asked me, I'd have said, I don't see him using a first-round pick on a linebacker. Part of that is because I think they really like Jacob Phillips. Obviously, Walker comes in free agency. But if there were a linebacker with some elite ability who dropped, now I think that could pique some interest, because you've kind of addressed everything else defensively here. So if all of a sudden one of these linebackers who can fly, and J.O.K. out of Notre Dame is certainly the type of guy that is intriguing to me. We've been linked to Zaven Collins a lot in a lot of these mocks. In terms of linebackers who can fly, who could be there at 26, who do you like, John?
Well, it is interesting to think about linebackers for the Browns. Let me compare for a second a guy like J.O.K. and a guy like Zaven Collins, and then I'll give you kind of what I think the Browns might be able to do at this position. Okay. What you see with Zaven Collins is you see a huge linebacker who is very smooth, can run, has a good feel in zone coverage. Those are all valuable things. At the end of the day, maybe it's just me, I have a hard time getting past the 260-pound linebacker who plays so small. He just cannot get off blocks. It's a huge struggle for him. He's not the instinctive, explosive, quick-moving type of player. He's more of the long strider, smooth, can bend a little bit, that kind of mover rather than the quick-footed explosiveness that you get with a JOK. It's not as much instincts with Collins, I think, as it is just unbelievable size and range. That's going to still be the case in the NFL. I know we see it at Tulsa. He's still going to be the biggest linebacker in the league in the NFL. He's going to have great range at that size. Those things are going to be true of him. He'll be able to help you out a little bit as a pass rusher, I think, maybe off the edge on occasion. But it's hard for me when a guy isn't more physical when they should be. I always wonder, physicality is a crucial part of playing in the NFL, especially as a front seven defender. I wonder about that with Collins. Don't have that concern at all with JOK. I mean, JOK is one of the most physical players in the class, high character, everything Collins is in some ways, instinctive, very explosive in his first couple steps, unbelievable hitter. That's the other big difference. JOK will just destroy people despite playing at like 215 last year. I think he was 221 at his pro day. Collins, on the other hand, is very much a drag-down tackler. You want a 260-pound guy to lay the wood and to knock guys back when he hits them. He just doesn't. You're going to have to be okay with those limitations. It's kind of Anthony Barr-like. He's never quite going to be everything you want him to be, but I think he can still be a good player. Barr's probably never been worth the top 10 pick, but he's still been a good player for a long time for them who does a lot of different things. So I think Collins can be a good pick. I think JOK can be a special player, but the role is going to be the hard thing. JOK did not play off-ball linebacker at Notre Dame. I know people want to sell him as a linebacker because they're not sure where to put him, but he really played slot corner. That's what he did. Overhang blitzer at times. Sometimes he'd step into the box like a safety would, but he was not a stack linebacker, read your gaps, all of this kind of stuff behind the defensive tackles in the run game. So that's a projection for him. If you want him to play that position, you're going to have to project him to that spot because he didn't play there. He played like a slot defender. He covered wide receivers. He carried guys vertical. He made plays on the ball in zone coverage. He passed off routes in zone coverage. He really played like a slot corner. He's just a huge slot corner and a small linebacker. I would probably keep him in a strong safety role, play him over the slot, use him as a matchup piece, teach him to play deep coverage so that at least when I rotated my safeties, he could play there situationally and certain downs and situations. He has to learn that part of it. But as a player, absolutely love the guy. I think later in the draft, if you're not going first round or maybe in the second round, I think there's a player like Derek Barnes from Purdue, big, physical, rangy, super long-armed, one of the longest-armed linebackers in the league when he gets there. What's his potential in coverage? I don't know. He was an edge defender. This year he moved off the ball. Very physical, very aggressive, knocks people back when he tackles them, seems to have the instincts for the position that you want and the range for the position you want. The question will be coverage. It was basic for him at Purdue this past season. What's his capabilities there, and is he able to consistently get off blocks too? But it's a good linebacker class, honestly is. You don't have to pay a premium in the first round to get a player who can start for you for a while.
John, this was awesome, man. Love talking to you, especially talking to you in the glow of a Super Bowl championship as well. I know how fun that had to be for you, so appreciate your time today, my friend.
Absolutely, Beau. Thanks so much for having me. Always a fun time jumping on with you.
All right, that is the great John Ledyard, NFL draft analyst for the Pewter Report, Buccaneers writer, reporter for the Pewter Report, and just one of the great guys when it comes to breaking down this draft. And you got some names there that we've heard and some new ones as well. That JOK conversation that he's having, we talked about that a little bit with Sam as well. That would kind of fit into the idea of positionless defense. Colleges is getting there. The NFL may be trying to get there as well. So I think there could be some interesting components to that going forward. Still so much more to come. You'll listen to Cleveland Browns Daily on 850 ESPN Cleveland. The 2021 NFL Draft, a little over 2 weeks away, April 29th, May 1, and you can be a part of the action at the NFL Draft Experience taking place outside First Energy Stadium. 2021 NFL Draft Experience is a free football celebration. It's open to families and friends and fans of all ages. Space is limited, though, so reserve your tickets today via NFL One Pass. So we had over the weekend the NFLPA talking about OTAs. We had today the news that the Denver Broncos are, as a team, their players are opting out of OTAs. My guess is that will be a coordinated effort, across all teams to do it, that the Broncos were first, but that others will follow on that front. And this is going to be something that, the NFL will have to deal with. There are a lot of things, we got through that season, and the sacrifices were incredible, but there are a lot of things that are going to be cropping up. And I know there's some news coming out of Buffalo in terms of fans, what's going to be required to be able to go to games there. So that we're a long ways between, quote, if you're looking for back to normal, we're a long ways from that, and there's still a lot of things that need to be worked out.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
All right, my friend.
We're seeing a lot of things. And, again,
it's a lot.
It appears that getting the vaccination is probably going to be your best way to live your life the way as close as you had before.
Yeah. I think that certainly is where we're heading on that front. All right, we know that we're heading into the next level. That's a win for you. It's coming up next. We're back tomorrow